Hi, Ritu.
Hi, Rohini. Great to see
So,
you too.
listen, we've known each other for like 32 plus years, so this is going to be like a, chat between friends, but we're going to be talking about something very specific that you
hmm
mentioned, as a turning point that you identified for you. So, I want us to begin with you explaining what that was.
Okay. So, when I was in fifth, we used to come back from school in a school bus, which used to get delayed because of traffic and, a railway crossing coming in the way. And sometimes it used to take us more than an hour to reach home. So it was all a girls' school. So we used to get together and enact fairy tales. And so one day I said, okay, I want to be Cinderella. So one of my cousins, who is very beautiful, she turned back and said, have you seen your looks? How can you be Cinderella? So I felt very bad. I came home crying. Then in the evening, she was, we used to stay in the same house. So she came to my part of the house, and I had some cream, some medicine on my face for some rashes that I was having. And so she, chuckled and said, "Oh, so you're trying to look beautiful now?" Now that I actually felt all the more miserable. But that thing somehow, from that day onwards, I was so convinced that I am not an attractive girl. I am ugly.
Mm.
So to overcome that feeling of something that I'm lacking, to overcome that feeling, I started acting out as if I don't care about looks, I don't care about outward things, and all I care about is the inner me. And I would develop that. I you know that I realized that I want to develop myself as a person who is so beautiful inside that nobody can, that people can look past my ugliness. So it's okay. Having said that, it that feeling, that lack of attractiveness stayed with me for a that feeling of lack of attractiveness stayed with me for a very, very long time. And at times I would go out of my way to show that I don't care, whereas I cared a lot.
Mm.
So over a period of time, I realized that my whole behavior was being dictated by that. So I was trying to be a nice person, but at times I didn't know whether the act that I'm doing is because I want to be a nice person or because I generally want to do it. So I started getting very confused with myself. So it took me quite some time to get over this dichotomy in my my thinking and this confusion. I remember even after I started working, there were times I used to think that, is this me doing this, or is this me doing it to please somebody? I had to always ask myself that question. But I think over the eh, maybe once I became a mother, everything else sort of took a backseat. But till that time, I was always in this confusion and this feeling of not being attractive enough. Not being attractive means, I mean, I used to think I'm ugly. So yeah, but
And you were, I mean, in fifth, sixth standard, you were, how old were you? About 9 or 10?
I was around 10, yes.
So that's, I
But
mean, that's a very young age for you to take such a grown up approach to what, your cousin maybe. I mean, your cousin said it without even thinking. And,
absolutely, absolutely.
a lot of, prejudices and society's perceptions are kind of almost, people don't even think about what they've just said and they don't even realize the impact they've made. Did did you ever sort of bring that up with maybe your parents, or did you internalize this whole thing at a
Oh
very
no.
young age?
So the day that thing happened, my I don't know why my parents were not there. My uncle was there. So he is my father's brother. He was, and his wife were there, and she has the same relation with them as I have. So they were there, and they saw, they witnessed all this. That when I came home crying, and then when they asked me, so when in the evening she made that comment, she got a big, big, big blast from the two of them. They were really angry at her. What do you think you are? So all that happened, and they did try to, soothe, or make me realize that it's not like you're not ugly or something. But I don't know why it stayed with me,
Yeah.
because I always felt, that I always felt that in my group, whether be it whether in the school or in the college or even in post graduation, or even when I started my work, that all the girls are very good looking, and I'm the only one who is an ugly duckling. So I stayed that, I don't know why it stayed, people, and I got a lot of love and affection from I belong to a family where, appreciation is the way of, living. So everybody keeps appreciating you a lot. Uh, every single achievement is celebrated. Even things when you worked hard and haven't achieved something is celebrated, that you worked hard. In spite of all that, I don't know why this one thing has impacted me so much. I seriously had a very strong imposter syndrome even in my office, not just because not because of just my feeling of being unattractive, but also that everything that is happening, I'm a fake. If I'm getting good marks, if I'm doing very well in academics, it's all fake. It's all luck, and I it's not my intellect. So I don't know why this one thing this stayed with me for a very, very long time. And this imposter syndrome I had till quite late in my career.
And that's an interesting point. So obviously that, that remark that was made almost kind of offhand way,
Yeah.
do you think that that in a way kind of extended, you suddenly started to feel like even all your other achievements were somehow sullied because of that? Or I mean,
No, I think so. I think so. It's very stupid. In retrospect, it's all very stupid. But that's the way it started playing on me, you know. And I remember it was from fifth standard itself that I had started excelling in my studies. So maybe that also played a part somewhere. That remark may have played a part there, because from fifth is when I remember I started, really topping in the class in every exam. Did very well till my schooling, my college. So maybe, it pushed me, but I always take that. So yes, it had an impact on me in one way, negatively, but it had a lot of positive impacts in my life,
yeah.
because that made me want to be, strong in other aspects of my life.
Yeah. And I loved what you said earlier that, you decided that you were going to focus on your inner beauty because, maybe there was not much you could do about how you look, but,
Yeah.
you could do something about the things that you could control, whether it was your academics or whether how you came across in relationships. So talk a little bit about that. So again, at the age of 10, that's an incredibly, grown up thing to have decided to do. So, who influenced you to think in that way?
I don't remember. I think it was, I have this innate need to be liked, very, very strong need. So I think it came from there. That okay, if it's not my, if if I'm a sore eye, then let me be so, let me work on other ways to make sure that people want to be with me,
Yeah, yeah.
people like me. Yeah.
And so it was your way of, feeling worthy of people's
Yes.
affection, of their admiration. And so you did that through your actions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay. And I think we talked about, we talked about this recently about what kind of personality type does that, and it was very interesting that you recognized that you might be someone called a personality type 2 in the Enneagram,
Yeah.
who is the pleaser, who's the giver, who actually has this need to be loved, and the way they find that love, or the way they feel they can earn that love is through deeds of kindness, or by being helpful. So you kind of embrace that from a pretty young
Yeah.
age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did.
So
And I think over a period of time, it became a part of me. So I was no longer doing it to please, but I started enjoying doing that. that if I'm doing something nice to another, I remember things that I have done for, or people have done for me and I have done for people. I may forget, and I tend to forget all the other negativities that have happened in my life. So, many times people will say, remember that happened and that person was so mean to you. I said, oh, I don't even remember that. So I think over the past few years, because of this thing that I deliberately developed in my early years, it has become part of me. That
So what
I
is it?
love to be nice to people.
Yeah, but what is the, obviously that's a very valued thing. We all love people who are caring and helpful, and certainly from our time when we were together as friends, I saw that you were such an incredibly generous and giving person. What was the dark side of that for you, where you were
Oh,
so giving and so kind and thoughtful and generous?
I had my inner demons to deal with. So one was, like I told you, that I was always questioning myself about my motive. Even when I know now in retrospect, I know I did that because I like to do that. But I was always questioning myself. In fact, interestingly, I never used to take any drinks in any during my 2 years stay in campus also, because I was scared about what I truly am. I didn't know how good or bad a person I am, because I was always putting on this act. I thought I was putting on an act.
Mm.
So I thought that if I'll drink and my real me will come out, I'll also get to know how bad I am.
Oh.
So, so that was one struggle that I had, that I will be found out that I'm not a nice person. Uh, the second is that, and that happened typically after marriage, when I was in trying to please everybody. I started ignoring my needs, uh, and that took a toll on my health. Uh, but I think after about a few years of marriage, I realized that. I mean, in fact, my husband played a role in making me realize that yes, you have to be nice, you have to do for people, but don't let people take advantage of you.
Yeah.
So I learned. So then I started again. I became very conscious of the fact, and then if I don't want to do something, I mean, if somebody wants something from me, and I know that the person would be very happy, but it is going to cause me a lot of distress or a lot of work, I will not do it. So I've learned it. But initially, yes, I had to struggle around it.
So I want to go back to something you said earlier, Ritu, and you talking about our time when we were on campus, at IIM Bangalore, that you didn't drink alcohol because you feared that it would bring out the real you. So what was it that you felt you were hiding from? Because it feels like you yourself didn't really know who the real you was. So it
I
wasn't
don't
just that
know.
you just didn't know. And why was it that you were unable to connect with the real you?
I think it was again that, like I said, it was an imposter syndrome in me, that, I've come here by fluke, uh, and I don't belong here. I'm just so that feeling, and then everybody's so nice, so caring. We had a very good, circle. So, and I may not be, that nicer person, and they'll find out, and then nobody would love me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
that
you
was a
you
thing, and
kind of
it's
felt,
very strange, Rohini, because my sisters, they literally worship me.
yeah.
So it's not like I did not have that kind of love at home, and I had been rejected at any point in time. But it's just that I don't know why that stayed with me for so long. It took me really a lot of retrospection to be able to get rid of it.
And I wonder in a way if that's the dark side of being so I don't this is weird, isn't it? That obviously you want to be loved and you want your family to adore you, but then the I suppose the dark side of that is that you feel, but maybe they adore me because I am who they want me to be. And, I've become so good at being the kind of person who will be adored that what if suddenly I let that mask slip a little bit and I become
Yes.
me? Will they suddenly think, oh, so we almost we get addicted to the love
Yeah.
that we receive, that we can't imagine not having that.
Yes. With all my, not just friends, with my relatives also, I was always trying to keep that. And I don't know whether it was a mask or it had become the real me. I was not sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was the problem, that I wasn't sure what I am.
So in terms of your, choices that you made, whether it was your career choices, talk a little bit about how this learning that you had about yourself and how you could actually, get the love and admiration you wanted. How did that influence your career choices?
No, I don't think that influenced my career choice. My career was, and that's, I tend to look at myself as, as distinct, a person, a distinct professional, and so I've actually been, so my career choices have never been influenced by what from this need to be loved.
Yeah.
Career choices have been more about where I want to go, what I want to do. Yeah.
But
But
did you
again, in there also, I always felt that I mean, I don't know why they think I'm so good. I always thought that what I knew is common sense. And it was one of my friends in office, she one day told me that, what are you talking about? Nobody's going to pay you premium dollars for common sense. And if it is common sense, it's not so common anyway, that.
yeah.
And so my, like she really, I remember that half an hour session, and she really, literally, not physically, but otherwise, she really bashed my head against the wall and made me realize that my thought processes and that I was worthy of where I was, and it wasn't like just. And I remember reading Lenin much later and realized, oh God, this is exactly every page of Lenin. I felt, oh, this is exactly what I used to feel.
So I think the point you made about, being the professional life being separate to your personal life, uh, and I understand that, but equally it's the same you that's going into the different places. And I wondered whether this need to be helpful and the need to be, seen worthy of whatever, translated into your work life as well, where you were like going above and beyond what was expected of you. And I was wondering whether that in some ways made it harder for you to sort of set boundaries about what was acceptable and what was not.
No, no, I was very clear about my boundaries. Yes, from a perspective of, on a personal level, I would be helpful, but I was very clear about what my role is and what I'm supposed to do. Yes, I will go a little beyond that, but I would not let anybody take advantage of me
Oh, that's
in the
good.
office. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
because
that
I
was
think a
very
lot of
clear.
people find that really hard to do and they end up becoming like super helpful and they completely burn
No,
themselves
no,
out.
no. I never did that because I thought that if I tried to do that, then I would have done injustice to my role,
Yes.
because you can do as much in
Yeah.
that period of.
Yeah. So talk us a little bit through then your journey of, further self-discovery and getting to know yourself. How did that happen?
Okay, I think one major thing that happened is that in 2006 I joined a kind of an NGO. It's a Buddhist philosophy. It's a Buddhist organization, uh, which I joined, which highlights two three things. One is mm, that we are part of the universe. So like we have the power of the universe within us, and so whatever can happen in the universe, you can do it. So everything is up to you. Second most important thing that for me is happiness is a decision and not a circumstance, is something that I learned from this practice. So that was a turning point for me, when I started understanding that whatever is happening in my life is going to happen in my life, has happened in my life, is only because of me and my actions. So and happiness is not, if I let somebody else dictate my happiness, I can never be happy. So that's the time I took charge of my happiness and started. That's the time when I started saying no to things as well.
Mm.
That if somebody is going to get, like, say, one unit of happiness by me going through 100 units of distress, I'm not going to do it. It is, if it is one in one, I will still do it maybe, but not one in 100. So I realized that, I have to learn that. And after that, I've seen, slowly and steadily, it became a habit that yes, I have to weigh things. And I would say that I would not let anybody's negativity overpower my positivity. So that over the period of, maybe 5 7 years, it took me to overcome that, that feeling of lacking something, that or the need to please everybody around me, need to be nice to everybody around me. So that started changing, and now I do things because I want to do them, not because I want to please them.
Mm.
So that practice really helped me.
That's a big breakthrough. So what kind of things did you, I mean, obviously in a sort of philosophical sense, I understand what you're saying, but to actually turn that philosophy into practice is a
Mhm.
completely different ball game. So can you maybe tell, because I'm sure people who are watching this or listening, there'll be some people who will resonate with what you've said and your experience. And so if they were to today think, well, today's the day I make a change in how I show up in the world and how I see my role in creating happiness for myself or the people, can you maybe give us some simple things that you did that worked for you?
So okay, now every time I would face a situation which I would find challenging, including physical, like when I went to started doing gymming, and there were some exercises which were very tough. I would tell myself, Ritu, you have the power of the universe. Now, if anybody in this universe can do it, you can do it too. So that, that hope of power within you, that hope that because of power within you, you can overcome any challenge. That became my constant, you can say leverage. That, because of which I was able to stay happy. So whatever the situation, I would never give up. I can never give up hope because of this feeling. There's this belief that I have the power of the universe within me. So that is what has been one of the key things, because of which I was able to get rid of all my, inner struggles and my demons that had been, troubling me all these 40 years. So basically this that, and the happiness lies within me. It is up to me to bring out that happiness, and one way to bring out that happiness is to enable other people to become happy. So now the reason to do things for others is not because I want them to like me, but because if I help them in any way, it will give me happiness. And it happens, the one of the best moments of your life, I feel, are when you are doing something for somebody.
Hmm.
Not your children, because that everybody does, but somebody beyond your immediate family. When you do something for them, that gives you so much of satisfaction, and that stays with you. And that's all. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very it's a very different motivation to doing it for somebody because you want them to notice you or appreciate you or be grateful. You do it because it gives you joy. You're
Yes.
not doing it because you're thinking, well, if I do this, then they'll do this for me, or they'll love me more or whatever, but you just do it because you want to do it. And that's the
Yes.
difference, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's much more satisfying than, and I don't have to deal with my turmoil that, oh, am I doing it for some ulterior motive, because I want to be liked. So those things go away. So then you really enjoy it and
Yeah.
need it to be there. Yeah.
So just recapping on the two key things you learned. One is that you have the power of the universe within
Mhm.
you, and every one of us is the same. That
Yes.
we are part of the universe. We're connected, and that's quite a huge that's a huge feeling, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
it doesn't just, I feel that it doesn't just extend to the power of the universe, but it's the beauty of the universe. It's the
Yeah.
intelligence of the universe. That if we can all believe that we all equally have it, we just need to learn to tap into it. uh,
Exactly.
and that can just open up so many possibilities for us. And the
Right.
second one was to do with basically your philosophy around happiness and
Yeah.
your own happiness and other people's happiness. I think those are really powerful. And do you have any sort of daily practices that you do that help you reinforce some of these things?
Yeah, so there's a lot of written material. So I read a lot. So this practice, this organization, the current president, he has written some 300 plus books. How around it may sound like two very simple concepts, but we tend to forget these two concepts. So in different ways, he's reiterating them. So we study a lot. So I sometimes study, and I also encourage people around me. We have these other members of this group, so I encourage them to overcome their challenges. I keep reminding them. So every time I remind them that you have the power of the universe, I am reminded that I have the power of the universe. So that kind of encouragement, when we share amongst each other, it's like a grassroots level practice where your neighbors, or people around you, you're trying to help them manifest the power from within. So that and this thing we do, like I do every day.
Yeah.
And then there is a meditation, a chant that I will chant daily. So and that chant basically means that I believe in the mystic law of cause and effect. So that my whole life is because of the causes that I've created. So when you chant something continuously, it does start going inside your psyche, and you start believing in that.
Mm. What's the name
So
of the organization?
it's called Soka Gakkai.
Okay,
Soka
we'll
Gakkai.
we'll put that in the show notes if that's okay. So I think people who are curious can find out
Okay, I'll do that.
about it.
I'll do that. Yeah.
I want to go back to the thing that you started with, which was the whole concept of beauty
Hmm.
and how, a flippant remark or an unkind sort of, joke made you suddenly question your own beauty. And
Hmm.
I wonder, there will be so many other people who have experienced that, and may not even have the kind of support and loving family that you
Yeah.
enjoy. So I can't even imagine what it must be for people like that. How can we tap into this notion of universal beauty and, how there's beauty in everything, anything and everything, because we're all part of the universe? What is your philosophy and, you know, self discovery? What has that taught you about how to think about beauty?
Mm. Again, it could be because of my the way I worked on myself. But I really feel that if somebody is a nice person, I find that person very attractive. So it is the I personally I don't associate with external looks,
Yeah.
you know, and I start off with believing in people, that somebody is, it is a good person. Now you have to prove otherwise, that you're not good for me to just not like you.
Yeah.
So generally tend to like people, believe in people, and I find beauty in that, because then when you believe in people, you find them attractive. At least for me, that's the way it works.
So it's about the inner beauty, and you're
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
not looking at external
yeah.
appearance.
Except for movies and all, yeah, there I look at the external beauty because I don't know the people.
Yeah, yeah.
Again, the characters, but yeah, in real life, in and I don't get too carried away with external
And you
looks.
also you mentioned, Ritu, briefly that when you got married and you had children, that was also a part of your life where you had the maximum opportunity for self-awareness and growth.
Yes,
Your husband
yes.
really helped you with that. Can you talk a little bit about that? What happened then?
Yeah, yeah. So he started telling me that he started pointing out that when I was going out of my way to please some person, how it was impacting my time with my daughter.
Yeah.
I somehow am, very passionate about my motherhood. Okay, so that really mattered to me. That if I'm neglecting my daughter because I'm trying to please X Y Z,
Hmm.
and slowly and steadily, and I started realizing that when you perform at X level for a constant period of time, even if that X level is way above the normal people's behavior, that X level becomes the baseline. So now to please, you have to go to the while X plus delta X.
Yes.
and there is no limit to the delta x's. So it was when he started pointing out specific instances that, see, you did this because of you wanted to please so and now see how the daughter suffered. So I think slowly and steadily I internalized this concept. And meanwhile, around this time, like I told you, I joined this practice where I started understanding that self worth. You are as worthy as you think you are,
Yeah.
not somebody else. So nobody else defines your worth.
Yeah.
So, so I think together these things help me get out of that syndrome.
And how do you so if you've been a people pleaser and people have got used to you doing a certain amount of service for them or help or whatever, and then you realize, okay, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. How did you in practice manage their expectations and change the parameters on which your relationship had been established?
Okay, so I think I took a very gradual approach to it. So I started having dialogues with these people. So every time there was a expectation that was not something that I wanted to work up to, I would have a dialogue with the person and explain to them why I can't do it. How it's going to impact, and very respectfully, without. See, one thing I always tried to do is to take out the emotion from the dialogue, because it tends to spoil things a lot.
Yeah.
And there were times when people whom I was saying no for the first time would feel angry with me. I did not let that anger stay with me, so I did not get angry. One second, I did not change my behavior because of the anger that the person was, or the you know the behavior of the other person, the negative behavior of the other person. I did not let that change my behavior. I stayed respectful. I continued to do what I thought needs to be, is my duty or something that I should be doing. But I stopped doing the extras, and I started telling them why I'm not doing it. So I think that helped. The communication helped.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not just the words of the communication, but the method of the communication, keeping the emotions out,
That's
really helped.
so powerful and not easy to do.
It is not. Yeah, it's not.
It's,
But I think when you respect, so when I say that I believe in the power of Buddha, or the power of universe is within me, I also believe at the same time that the power of universe is within you. So when I'm having a dialogue with you, if I assume that you will not understand, my whole tone will be very different. But if I know that there is a part of you which will understand, then I can be very patient and I can leave the emotion out of it.
yeah. Oh, that's so powerful. A thought also occurred to me the last couple of days about, what they talk about, the infinite mirror. Like if you have
Mhm.
two mirrors facing each other,
Yeah.
basically you just have, this infinite reflection. And I feel sometimes that this happens to us, when it comes to emotions. Like if one
Okay.
person's angry, and then our behavior changes to respond to that anger, and then they respond. And so actually you can imagine how a small spark turns into a wildfire. Whereas if
Yeah.
we could just, consciously decide we're not going to mirror that, this person's angry, we're just going to let them be angry and let that anger just wash over and let them calm down, and then we'll talk. It can just change the whole dynamic. And you've just explained it so beautifully on how you did that. Um,
Yeah.
so Ritu, now kind of where you are in, in your life, and your daughters are growing up, and so what have you been able to take some of the lessons that you learned, maybe at the time that you were their age, some of the challenges that you faced, are you seeing any of those being faced by your girls? And if so, how are you helping them?
No, they have different set of complex, the challenges that they are facing. Much different from what I faced, and I have tried to be a good friend to them. So even from a very young age, I've always treated them as somebody who can think for themselves, not somebody that needs to be told what is right and what is not right.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that it has come through a lot of reading about parenting, about even in this practice that we have. Our president, he writes a lot about parenting as well. He believes that every child is has a, again, the capacity of a Buddha, the capacity of the universe. So assuming that the children don't know and then you have to tell them everything, uh, is not the right way. That's what he says, and I have tried to follow that. And since I've tried to be a friend more than a mother, more than just a provider. They do come up with anything, even small issues that they are facing. They would come to me and share with me. And if even if they're not sharing, I can sense that something is wrong, and I'm able to bring make them speak it out. So then I either share my life experiences, or since I'm from a very close knit family, so if I don't have an experience, somebody in my family would have an experience around that. So I'm able to relate those experiences to them and help them come out of those challenges that they are facing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then I just tell them about the instances. I don't preach. I try not to preach them. I mean, as a mother, you would preach, but I try not to preach them.
Yeah, that's I think that's a really interesting way to think about, especially if you think that even the child has a wisdom of the universe.
Yeah,
Allow it to blossom in the way that's natural
exactly.
for them. That's great, Ritu. So we're coming to kind of towards the end of our conversation today, and I have a couple more questions. So I think the first thing I want to ask you is, if there's somebody listening to us today who may have resonated with some of the challenges that you faced, especially in
Mhm.
your younger years, um, what's the one thing that you would like to leave them with?
That I think that happiness is a decision, not a circumstance, and you are as worthy as you think you are. Nobody else defines your worthiness.
Yeah. So if we can find a way to love ourselves and accept
Yeah,
ourselves exactly as we are, then actually
absolutely,
that's the main thing, isn't it?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And my final question to you, Ritu, is that we each have our own, I suppose, own sort of view of what a fulfilled life would look like for us.
Mhm.
What does a fulfilled life look like for you, and do you feel you are already there?
Uh, of- I think I'm there, and I think again this fulfillment is from within. So if what you have, you are happy with that. I'm not saying not aspire for bigger things, but be live in the now. When we live in the now, and I say, okay, I have 20 things which so many people don't have. That makes you feel fulfilled, and I think I've been in that space for quite some time now.
So it's about being happy with what you have, but also
Yes,
knowing that if you want more, that you have the power to achieve it.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
That's beautiful. Ritu, thank you so much. And I
Thank
think
you.
you're beautiful inside and out, for what it's worth.
Thank you so
And
much.
it's been so great to have you as my friend. And I love this conversation. It's kind of real, and it's very topical. A lot of people feel they're not good enough. It could be in
Mhm.
looks department, it could be in something else. So I
Yeah.
hope that, your story and your messages will resonate with them. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rohini. I love talking to you as always.